Hi guys, welcome to the Dad Bub Show. I'm one of your hosts, Ken Blowfield, and Brendo and I, we interview dads all over the world to find out their secrets on balancing how to be a high-performing dad and a high performer in life too. So without further ado, let's get into the show. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Dad Bub Show. I'm here with Matt Halson, a good friend of mine over here in Australia, and we're going to be talking about what it's like to be a dad to live at your highest performance. Now, Matt Halson, he's not just your average, everyday Joe Blow. He is the founder of the Instagram Father of the Tribe AU, and is partners with his beautiful wife who owns a company or an Instagram called Mother of the Tribe whilst raising 4 kids, and she's amassed that following to over 34,000 people on Instagram. So these people are absolutely dominating it in the kind of world of understanding, how to be great parents, but also live a fulfilling life and be obviously having an amazing relationship as well. So today in today's conversation, we're going to speak a little bit about Matt and his wife's journey, as parents, coming to this perception of really gaining their identity as who they have to be to become parents. And, we all kind of struggle with that whole identity crisis in terms of we're a child or a teenager, we're a young adult, and then, we're living our lives and it's all about us. And then all of a sudden, boom, we've got another person that depends on us to survive. Now, Matt doesn't just have one, he's got 4 that depends on him to survive. And so we're going to really go deep into that, and we're going to go deep into the battles of their mental health and what's kind of led them to where they are today. So I'm really, really looking forward to introducing this man, this legend, Matt Halson. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, man. That was a great introduction.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So Matt, give us a little bit of a 411 about you. Like, what should people know about you?
People should know about me that the work I do is entirely based around my own experiences. So the things that I talk about on my Instagram, the things that I talk about in general with people out and about on the street, at work, wherever, even in my friendship circles, is entirely rooted in my own experiences and the depth of that experience of me growing up. The traumas that were impacted on me as a child, and how I rebelled against society from a young age, so from about 13 or 14 years old. And I worked through all that experience up until the point, exactly like you said, I had a child. I had my first child, and that was just that boom, smack in the face moment for me of how I'm showing up in this world now is how she's going to grow up, and that's what she's going to expect from a man when she's older. And that just floored me. I just went, I can't be like that. I can't give her this version of a man to grow up and aspire to be married to. There has to be more to my life than this. And that has been the foundational structure for my growth as a man, as a father, and as a husband. And also for me stepping into the coaching space and helping other men achieve similar things in their relationships.
Yeah, amazing. I love that, dude. So let's kind of touch base on that, kind of start off this podcast or this episode. So, you said, you can't be that man. You have to be someone else for your daughter to aspire to, obviously to marry potentially in the future. So like my curious question towards you, it's like, who do you feel a man has to be, in this new modern world of almost, gender equality, this big push of gender equality, this big push of, women finding independence from men, and they're not having to be this reliance on men. So it's like, who do you feel the modern man needs to be the best dad and to be the best husband of the future?
So to me, that looks very much like being authentic. So it's not a set of rules that anyone else gets to determine for us that says this is what you need to be a good man. I call bullcrap on a lot of that stuff. No one gets to decide for me what is best for me. So that's entirely up to me. So in working out how to be authentic, you need to do a fair bit of inner work. You need to work out what things are impacting your decisions, what things are impacting your life in positive ways, in negative ways. And you need to learn tools so that you can navigate different situations to build yourself into the man that you want to be, that's going to bring you the most amount of happiness and the most amount of contentment in your life. Like I said, it's never going to be someone comes along and tells you like, here, you do these 4 things and miraculously life's going to be exactly what you want it to be. It's not the way it works. It's a building momentum. It's a constant learning about yourself and the things that are occurring in your life, and then adjusting and pivoting based off of the input you get from that. So values is the number one thing for being authentic. If you're not living a value-oriented life, you're not going to find what makes you truly happy, because you're potentially going to be living out of alignment a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. So, let's just kind of dive into that then. So, finding your authentic self, I know you said that you need to do a lot of inner work, but, and then obviously you mentioned living life of values. So, how does one identify what their values are? And, authenticity is something really important to me, but it's very hard for me even to pinpoint what authenticity really is, because to a lot of extent, sometimes we're blinded by the perception of the life that we've been brought up in. I know, particularly from my experience, maybe I'll just go down this road for a little bit, and then you can kind of circle back and answer my question. But for me, it's I was brought up in a Christian household, specifically Catholic. My mum was Catholic and very, very heavily devout to her faith, and she still is. My father, not so much, but obviously went along the journey and the ride for my mother for as long as he did before, my mum and dad separated. But that obviously took me down a specific direction. Now my view on life, my authenticity, my values have some sort of relation to that. But also then my authenticity is pulled from my dad and all the other past experiences. And that could be right or wrong, right? So it's how do we determine what values are important to us? And then how do we identify if they're even good for the world?
Okay, so I guess that's a two-part question. So the first thing, I guess, around establishing authenticity is the things that happen to us as kids, the ways that we're raised, that builds in us a baseline story of how life happens. But that doesn't have to be the case going forward. It never has to be the case, right? We get to choose to either accept and continue the same story, or whether we alter the story, we completely reject the story. So in my case, I lent into the path of I'm just going to reject that story and I'm going to completely find my own. And that was what led me down the path of authenticity. That being said, a lot of it was still rooted in my future experiences with other people that I treated as mentors and guides that were anything other than that. They were not the right kind of person to be taking mentorship from or to be taking life advice from. So figuring out your authentic self starts with understanding what patterns and behaviors you're bringing forward from a childhood, and which ones of those are just stories that you're telling yourself that you have to continue. This is how I need to behave. Well, why? Well, that's how I was told a good kid behaves. Okay, well, is that actually true? Do you believe that? And what happens if you choose not to believe that? What does a good kid or a good man look like to you? And that's where we really start to come up with our own vision of what good looks like. And we can lean into that. And anyone that takes a really open approach to that and a really inward approach to that is always going to come out with a positive outlook on that rather than a negative one. You're not going to say, well, I'm a family man, so a good man looks like a man who works 150 hours a week. Whether that's possible or not doesn't matter. But you're not going to be a good family man if you do that. So that's going to be inauthentic, right? So you need to be able to take that approach and look at everything you're doing and whether it's in alignment with this core center of self of this is what a good man actually looks like. A good man is there. He provides for his family. He provides love. He provides security. He provides, food. He provides a home. He provides everything that makes a family unit warm and connected. But how does he actually do that is a completely different story. But the actual act of showing up in that way is what, if you embody that as a value, then that's what brings it as an authentic version of self. And I think the second part was around actually establishing those values. The only way to establish your core values that I know of, that's a very effective way, it can be a time-consuming way, is to print out as many different defining words as you can and go through and just highlight every single word that jumps out of the page to you as important. And then it's a process of cutting down those things of what is important and then grouping them together and then cutting it down further and then grouping more and then cutting further until you find, 5 to 7 of these core words that really jump out at you as important. So for me, it's family, it's love, it's security, it's adventure, it's knowledge, it's courage. And those things are the things that I look at. And when I read that word as to its importance and its relevance to me, it is the most important things in the world to me, all of those things. So therefore, I take those values and I say, well, how do I live authentically in line with these values? If I value adventure, yet I'm never taking adventure, am I living an authentic existence? No, I'm not. So how do I correct that? And then you can start to, use your logical brain to figure out ways to actually incorporate these things that are important to you into your existence. And then those two things kind of feed off of each other. And you can get to a point where as you build more of a self-image and living more authentically, then you can start to evaluate your values again. And you might find that some of them have changed over time. As you've started to figure out who this person is inside you, now I need to adjust. I need to pivot again. And then you're building and you're just sort of compounding on your authenticity.
Yeah, amazing. And so when should someone kind of start looking into this, right? So this whole idea of looking into, speaking to your inner child or speaking to your inner self, doing inner work, I know it's been around for donkey's years, right? But I'm seeing a lot of popularity over the last 5 years. And maybe this is just my observation in the space, i.e. I've become more mature and I've looked into my own work, and maybe that's the reason why I've seen it bigger over the last 5 years. But I would have to say it's a growing trend, right? Because the more people that become aware of it, the more it compounds and grows. But I'm curious, right, from your perspective, do you see this as something that people should be taught as youngsters in high school? Work on themselves, talk to their inner child, work on their inner self? Or is this something that you can wait till you're an adult and wait till you're a family man from that perspective?
I definitely think the answer to that is both. I think that kids should be taught how to develop their own sense of self in a better way. They should be encouraged to do so. They should be encouraged to be asking questions and to speak when they feel the desire to speak, rather than, the old adage of children are meant to be seen and not heard. It's like, well, that doesn't exist in my house. That's not something that I prescribe to. And I don't prescribe to following trends. So if my kids want to do their own thing, I'm fully in support of that. If they want to wear whatever clothes they desire to wear, have their hair cut however they want, okay, within reason. But
yeah,
I think if they were to implement things like that, so more inner work, teach kids about how to calm themselves down, how to regulate themselves, how to understand how they operate at a better level. And there's only so much you can sort of do with kids, but you could start to sort of ramp it up as they mature, as they get older and older and older. I mean, I think that there would be a massive benefit to the world just from my perspective, for men or for young boys that are coming out of school to do a lot of work around sexuality, a lot of work around emotional regulation and control, how to have open communication and how to hold space for the emotions of other people, because that is something that's not learned. And that is a monstrous life skill. If you can harness those things and figure out how to do it effectively, it makes your relationships and life so much better. So as far as teaching kids this, absolutely they should. But it should be scaled to the abilities of the kid, right? So like my kids do some meditating and things like that. So it's just small, it's just mindfulness. It's allowing them the space that if they're upset and emotional, that they can do that in a safe environment with me. So if they're getting really upset and wild, I'll go into their bedroom with them. I'll be like, right, what do you need? Do you need to scream? Do you need to punch the pillows? Do you need to do something? Like, let's do it in a productive way, not a destructive way. It doesn't pay to go and scream at other people. It doesn't pay to go and destroy property or destroy things to make you feel better, because it's only going to compound it later. But if you remove yourself to a safe location and you can do it in an environment with other people that are there to support you and hear you and validate your emotions and how you feel at the time, that's a completely different experience. So I try and provide that for my kids. As for adults, right now is the best time. If you haven't begun, right now is the time to start. It's never too late to get into any kind of self-development work. It's hard. It's very challenging work. It's very intimidating, and at times it's straight up scary to do. but the value that comes from understanding yourself and understanding your experience better is incredible. It's incredible to start to understand how these things in your past have affected you now and affecting your future. Then you start to see how these things that you grew up with, that you've built an attachment to, are now impacting your family, because you're bringing that same trauma and those same things into your family. Well, then once you understand that, you have the ability to make a conscious decision to stop it. And that's not an immediate fix. It's not well, I understand that, if I yell at my kids and this is the consequence and I'm just going to stop yelling at my kids. It's like, no, it's now a conscious effort not to do it. And to consciously not do it, you need to go and find the ways to manage your stress better, manage your emotions better, manage your time better, so that when you show up with your kids, you can be present, you can be calm, and you can be more grounded.
I love that. It's so interesting kind of hearing that, because the first thing in change is obviously conscious awareness of your actions, right? And so many people think that just because you're consciously aware, you can just go ahead and change, a lifetime of habits and routines and rituals. It's like, oh, geez, if it was easy as that, we'd all be billionaires, we'd all be rich, we'd all be famous, we'd all have everything that we want in life. But just because you're consciously aware doesn't mean that you're taking any action to change what you're doing. And obviously it becomes that is the turning point. Is like, have you made that decision to actually make a change? And then are you actually working on it? I know Jordan Peterson, I kind of come back to him quite frequently because, I don't know, he's just always all over my social media, so I see quite a bit of it. But I know a lot of the things he talks about is like, don't be cowardice. So don't be afraid to say the things that kind of's in your heart. And as men, and especially I think growing up, I'm a 93 baby, and then obviously growing up through the mid to late 90s and then obviously early 2000s, my whole education system in primary school and high school was, don't just listen to instruction, follow instruction, don't question instruction. That was almost the preach. It's like, this is what you have to do. This is how you do it. Go out and do it. This is what you got to do. This is how you do it. Go out and do it. And there was never, it's like, don't question society. Don't question authority. You have to follow authority. And that's almost in a sense a trauma that I've got from my childhood. And now I hear people who are similar ages to me, who maybe went to the same high schools as me, maybe a little bit older than me. We've all got kids now, and listening to how they treat their kids, it's like, and they might be a little older, 5, 10, 12. It's like, do this. And then, the 12-year-old's like, I don't understand why I have to do that, mum. You're not doing that. It's like, why do I have to do it if you don't have to do it? It's like, because I'm a mum, do what I say. Don't ask questions. So it's like, oh shit, that's a trauma that we've brought, or that's experience that we've brought from our livelihood into the current day. And that's affecting the present generation. So it's like, what's your trick in breaking these cycles?
Ooh, a trick or a skill or a tool. I don't even know. I don't even know if there is there's no one-stop shop for that, because it's built on there's so many inputs into those kinds of things that we do, like those behaviors that we bring forward from society. It's deeply ingrained in us that, you need to listen to your parents, respect your elders. You need to, don't do things differently because you'll be ostracized for it. And the only mechanism to changing that, I guess, now that I think about it, is to not give a crap what other people think. That's really the answer. Is you need to be prepared to do things your way and risk ridicule, risk condemnation, risk the ostracism from your peers, because they're not going to like it when you start to do things differently. We homeschool our kids, and that was a tough decision for us to make. Well, wasn't for my partner. She was pretty committed pretty fast, but for me, I had to come around to that idea, because I had this deeply ingrained belief that homeschoolers were weird, and it was different, and it was, you can't do that. And then the more I sort of started to analyze it, I was like, well, hang on a minute. There's actually a lot of benefits to us as a family unit to do this. There's a lot of benefits to my kids to do this. There's a lot more benefits than there are negatives. The biggest negatives is that they don't go to school and they're not around other kids their own age all the time. Well, that's okay. We can handle the social aspects of things. But then I started to question it even further, because I love to question things. And I guess that's another skill to have, is question everything, question all your decisions, and question all your logic and reasoning behind things to see where it actually comes from. But the big thing for me when it came to deciding to homeschool, and my biggest fear over doing that was that it's all on us and I've got no one else to blame. And how easy of a path it is if you're choosing to take a backward step in how your kids are raised effectively by sending them to school. You're allowing someone else to do a fairly significant portion of the educating and raising of your kids. So it's a hard thing to be like, I'm going to take full responsibility for that. And if this turns out bad, I can't turn around and just, oh, the schooling system did this, and, you know, this government did this, and these policies created this thing, and, you know, they shouldn't have brought iPads in for preschoolers, and like all these things that you can use as mini scapegoats. Well, by us deciding to homeschool, we've removed all of that. So now it's all on us. So yeah, accepting responsibility for your part in your life, and especially in how your kids are raised.
I really like that because yeah, I think so. I think that's something that my wife and we've kind of discussed. Well, not really discussed. I've kind of raised it. I think homeschooling is really, really interesting and really cool, and it's something that we're actively looking into. Obviously, it puts a lot of responsibility on the parents, naturally, and obviously you have to look for external, support to kind of get that, get all the education or fill in all the gaps that you may not necessarily be skilled at. I know when I look at the curriculum of my year 7 nephew, I'm like, oh, geez, this is some hard stuff. I can't remember any of this. Good thing, though, I'm still over all the maths. I've still got, my Asian descendants give me the skill set to understand maths still pretty good. So I'm lucky there. So I'm quite blessed from that perspective. But I know looking and having those conversations with my mother and father-in-law and my sister-in-law, they're like, why would you homeschool? That's just so weird. No, they don't get any socialization with other children, this or that. So I love to hear that other people are doing it and doing it effectively. And one of the reasons why I even considered it was my good friend. They live in Bali, super successful. Like, they probably earn tens of millions of dollars a year. Their daughter Hanalei opened a business, I think, when she was 11, and by the time she was 13, she was offered several $1 million for this business. Now she's 16. She's been homeschooled. She's gone, in and out of these international schools because they allow her to choose her own path. Mm-hmm. And naturally, as a 13, 14-year-old girl, she wanted to be around her other peers. She did it for 6 months, didn't like it, came back and got homeschooled. But now, like, she is all over the internet preaching amazing, powerful opportunity for children, giving children their power and giving children their voice. And I love this thing that her parents say. So the parents that I'm referring to are Rhonda and Brian Swan from the Unstoppable family, and their daughter's Hanalei Swan. And one of the things that Rhonda and Brian asked Hanalei when she was a young girl, it's like, Hanalei, what do you want to do now? Not what do you want to do when you're older, which is the typical question that most parents ask their children. It's like, no, what do you want to do now? Who do you want to be now? And she said, I want to be an artist and a designer. I was like, cool, well, let's go ahead and do that. Now, naturally, they had money and they have connections, so they could kind of make that happen. But anyone can fulfill their child's dream if they're, they say, right, it's not about the resources, it's about your resourcefulness. And so if you are resourceful, you can find the means to give your child and help them pursue their dream now, not later, which I think is really, really cool. And kind of touching on that whole experience as a homeschool child or as homeschool children, there are more abilities for you to really connect with your child and understand, cool, what do they want in life? What do they want now? Who do they want to be now? And what can I give them to support them on their mission and their journey? And, most importantly, understand their values and their authentic self today.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a powerful story. And that's a big way that we try and raise our kids too. I mean, I'm no serial entrepreneur and I'm not worth millions, but I fully support my kids in their understanding of self. And that's one of the biggest benefits with the homeschooling is when they're interested in something, you can tie every aspect of study into that. You can tie you can tie science and maths and English and other languages and everything into something that they're interested in. And I always like to think about, now this was probably the question that really solidified it for me to be like, okay, let's just do it. I mean, worst case, if we're terrible at this and it doesn't work out, our kids can always go to school, right? We can always do that. But I can never send them to school and then bring them back and be like, all right, you're going to homeschool now. I mean, I could, but there's a lot more challenges present with that. But the big question for me was, if I could redo school again and I had the opportunity to learn every single class in a way that was more interesting to me, so I could just pick a topic and study that topic in every one of those classes, how would school have looked different for me? And the only answer I've got to that is infinitely better. You know, if I wasn't forced to learn, like I had to learn Indonesian for a number of years, I was not interested in languages. You know, I had to study books and plays in English. I'm not interested in that. But I was really interested in physics. I was interested in chemistry. I was interested in engineering. If I could have just focused all my attention into those things, how would my life have changed? How would it have been different? And the only thing I can gather is that I would have a much more passion-filled existence by having been able to lead my study myself in my own interests.
Totally. And I think, I think there's there's almost a catch-22 in that regards, and especially with current like let's call it secular societal schooling, right? Like what the typical society does, which is if you go to these like normal schools, let's call them what they are, right? Normal schools, they and you do select your own journey or your own path. It's like you're going to be very much heavily influenced by your peers and what the cool kids are doing. And that may not necessarily be aligned with your values, but at least if you're homeschooled, it's like you don't have that distraction of what are my peers, what are the cool things to do? It's like I can just go ahead with my passion, right? Yeah. I know I look at my son, right? And I want to give him every single opportunity I can in life. And there's a couple of things that I have issues with that I wish I don't want my son to have issues with, right? So one of those things might be like rhythm, can't dance for shit, right? It's like, cool. I'm going to give him that opportunity to dance. If he loves it, cool, great. If he doesn't, that's cool. We're out of there, right? I want to give him that opportunity to do gymnastics because I think there's just so much fundamental core strength in that can benefit in other areas of his life further in the future for any sporting activity that he wants to do. If he loves it, great. If he doesn't, no worries. But at least he had that opportunity. I didn't get those opportunities. Probably wouldn't have liked it, but at least the opportunity was there, right? But when I think back to my in primary school, I was like, oh well, dancing's not for boys was my mindset. Right? Gymnastics is for girls, not for boys, right? That's lame. That was my mindset because of my peers around me. But if I was homeschooled, I wouldn't have had that perception. And therefore, I would have, if I was interested, actually pursued it. So I think there's a whole immense, tremendous advancement to being homeschooled. So what did you guys consider the downsides of homeschooling?
The biggest downside would be the mental load, to be perfectly honest,
right,
and transparent with that. Like
for you guys or for the kids?
No, for us. Like we're always around the kids, and it's difficult to not give all of yourself to them all the time. So trying to find the time or make the time for independence and still to be able to continue to explore our own individuality can be harder when you're homeschooling because you don't have that opportunity to like take your kids to school 3 or 4 days a week and then work 2 days a week. So you've got 2 days where you're just at home, you can do whatever you want by yourself. It's like, we don't have that opportunity, you know, and that's a sacrifice that we choose to make. So making sure that we support each other in our own independence and individuality is an important part of our homeschooling life. And that's tricky to manage. That can be really tricky to manage because kids still get sick, you know, kids still have big emotions and all those types of things. So that's probably the biggest challenge that we have is just carving out the time. But I think we do a really good job of making the time for each other.
Totally. I think just like watching you and your wife on Instagram and seeing what you guys do, it seems like you definitely do that extremely well and still have the time to do your own things to better the greater society as well. So it's like what you guys do on Instagram and jumping on podcasts like this, you still carve out the time to make the opportunity to do things, not just for your own family unit and yourselves, but also for the greater community as well, which is, I think, one of the most important things of just being human, right, and being alive. It's like it's not just us. It's like how can we better society? And social media and the internet has given us so much opportunity to be able to do so. So, what about for your kids then? So, obviously, you got the downside for you and your partner in terms of the responsibility, the workload, the mental load that you guys have now because you guys chose to homeschool. But what about for your kids? What do you guys see the negatives associated with homeschooling for your children?
Not many, and the few that I can think of, in like ultimately, are probably not that big of a deal, in my opinion. Right, but they're going to grow up with a completely different perspective on that because they've not experienced school the way I experienced school. Right, they're not going to experience that peer group pressure. They're not going to, or as much of it. They're not going to experience as much of the face-to-face bullying or the cyberbullying that kids are now experiencing, which is rife through schools. They're not going to experience the whole having to sit down and being forced to do work that you're not that interested in. Yes, they have to do some of that because it's still important. They learn to read and write and do maths, but we can make it fun and we can give them the independent one-on-one time. So the negatives are pretty minimal. I guess the biggest negatives would be, yes, they're not around other kids their own age all the time. But my biggest question to that is, well, how many of us grow up and enter the workforce and spend heaps of time around people our own age? Most of the time you enter the workforce and you're working with people of all different ages. You're right. Maybe, sure, if you're working at McDonald's or in a cafe or something like that, you're going to be working with people of a similar age. But by the time you hit 30 or even mid-20s, like you're working with people from all age groups, all age brackets, and I know for me personally, leaving school and only really having a lot more negative interactions with older males when I entered the workforce, that was tough to navigate. Because I hadn't been prepared to deal with people of different walks of life and different experiences and different age brackets. They're all at different levels in life. And I didn't know how to receive praise from them. I didn't know how to receive differing information or advice from them and actually go and apply it. It was sort of just stuck in this thing of like, I need to take information for people that are my age. So I look at that now as that's a negative trait that can happen when you leave school. And it's not till later in life and with understanding that you start to go, oh shit, actually these people were offering me really, really solid advice, heartfelt advice. And I ignored all of it. It was like, if I could rewind the clock and change things, I would, but I can't. So my kids are exposed to lots of age groups.
Yeah. Sorry to jump in there, man. It's like even the opposite as well. I know, like, because I was indoctrinated throughout high school, it's and even pretty much mostly high school. It's like you respect your elders. Anyone older than you is more intelligent than you. They've been in it for longer, and because they've been in it for longer, they know more than you. So just follow their guidance and advice. And so, like when I entered the workplace or workforce, it's like I didn't challenge enough because it's like, well, they've done it longer. Who am I to kind of question their authority in this space? And that's a problem in itself. It's like, fuck, in fact, that's a massive problem. Because just because they've done it longer doesn't mean they're better. Like, yes, they've got tremendous experience, and yes, you can leverage that experience. But it's like you also have a different perspective, and you should voice your perspective. The beauty of, I suppose, homeschooling is like because you have that interactions with a whole heap of different age groups, in these different tutoring groups. If you guys do that as well, it's like, well, now there's this opportunity. If it's like I'm a young kid and I can voice my opinion to someone a little bit older, and they can discuss things collaboratively. That's a very, very strong skill set to have all the way through youth.
Yeah, absolutely. My kids are great at talking with fully grown adults and young kids. They talk with younger kids than them. They talk with older kids than them. It's a never-ending thing. So as far as I look at that, is like they're going to grow up and they're going to be completely comfortable and competent in communicating with people of any age and learning from them and at least being able to sustain conversation with different people. And I'm also not taking that standard approach of, you have to respect your elders. I'm teaching my kids that respect is earned, not given. Sure, there's absolutely a place to show respect to people, especially people you don't know. Like, I respect everyone until they give me cause not to. And then we're not on a level playing field anymore. It's like, if you're going to show disrespect to me, then I'm not going to show you respect any further. It's like, I'll be civil. I won't be disrespectful, but you don't have my respect. It's like, I think teaching kids about that as well is like being disrespectful and not showing respect to me are two different things. being disrespectful is saying exactly what you think of a person. That's really just you stroking your own ego. Whereas not showing respect can be like, you don't get to tell me what you think and have me actually listen to it. You don't get to do that. You don't get a place at my table. So I'm not going to listen to what you have to say. Like, you want to tell me, it better be invited, or else I'm just going to call you out on that and say, hey, look, I didn't ask for your opinion on this, so I don't want it.
Yeah.
And it can be confronting for people to get their heads around that kind of style of communicating, but it's important to protect your own energy. And yeah, for me, respect, if teachers showed me respect in school, I was good for them. But if they showed disrespect, or we had disagreements and they weren't prepared to sit down and talk about it, because I was always very much like, let's just try and talk it through, then I would just act up even more in their class, because it was like, well, I'm not being respected here, so why should I show respect?
Yeah, it's so interesting when I think about that and I reflect on that. It's like, I never ever thought of it as respect. It's just that the people, the teachers, that I'm just going to call it for what it is, actually gave a shit. I gave a shit for. It's like, I was a shit in their class, yet they still took the time to speak to me after class or speak to me during class. And I didn't understand respect back then. All I understood was they're giving me some time of day to help me better as a person. And I appreciated that. And so it's, when people give a shit, it's like, you want to give a shit back. When people really care about you, you really want to care back. And I think that's so awesome. And I love what you were kind of saying there. It's like, don't be spineless. You don't have to, if they're not giving you respect, don't give them your respect back. And it's so true. And I know there's a lot of people in my life, not by choice, but by, other means of how people get in your life. It's like, they don't have my respect, but I'm civil with them because, it's the nature of how we live in this world. And you have to be confident enough in your own standing to call people out on their shit when they're saying shit that you don't necessarily align with, and it hasn't been asked for. And I think that's important to teach our children, because if we don't teach it, it's like they will be taught to be walked all over. And that's not how we want to raise our children. We want children who are strong and confident and independent. Now, man, look, I really, really appreciate your time. We're coming to the end of our conversation here. And so there's always two questions that we always like to ask people who jump on the show, right? Number one, it's like, what do you do as a dad to stay fit and healthy and maintain the level of, I suppose, prowess and strength for you and your children in the future?
So for me, I like to work out in some capacity or another. So I've done powerlifting over the years, on and off. It's very challenging to be engaged in something like that when you've got a full-time job and a family. Being in the gym for 2.5 hours is not easy, especially if you're doing it at 4 a.m. So I've backed off a lot on the intensity of the training. But yeah, I definitely need to have a gym membership or have some weightlifting or something involved in my life, mostly for my own mental health. If I'm not doing that, I know it puts me out of alignment and out of integrity. And then I get very irritable very fast. So I've got weights at home in the shed. I get my kids involved in that whenever I'm doing that. Well, not every time. Sometimes it needs to be just for me, by me. I need to have, remove that external input from everyone else, go in there, be by myself. Other days they'll come in. I've got a couple of baby kettlebells and stuff that they like to pick up, and I teach them how to swing it and do all that kind of stuff. So I try and keep them involved where I can. Nice. But yeah, gym membership, man, and taking the time for yourself for sure.
Amazing. I love that. And look, I mean, we did obviously touch on your experience. Sorry, we didn't actually touch on it. I mentioned in the intro. We're going to touch on your experience of mental health. So we'll have to get you on another episode sometime, and obviously go through that experience, because I think that's going to be really, really meaningful and important too. And obviously, your own change in terms of how you became a man and how you became a family man, which is going to be super interesting on our next episode as well. But the final episode we always like to ask is, what's one question that you wish someone had asked you that no one's ever asked you before?
Well, that's a tough question.
It always gets people thinking.
The question that no one's asked me is, how do I build myself into an authentic version of myself while juggling family life and a relationship without damaging that relationship?
So allow me to be the first one to ever ask you that. It's like, how can someone juggle being their authentic self whilst all the other things that you said earlier?
How can someone do that?
That's a big question.
With conscious effort and patience. It's a nice. Long and difficult road for sure, but it takes a lot of tough conversations with partners and a lot of self-reflection to be able to do that. And every moment through that, there needs to be the conscious effort that, like, I'm not doing this to tear my family apart. You know, finding my authentic self and living that way does not have to mean the destruction of my relationship.
Love that, bro. Love that. So look, Matt, I know you're a coach. You're doing some amazing things out there in the world and the community, and obviously helping a lot of men transition to become superhumans, and obviously doing amazing things out there. So if more people want to find a little bit more about you and get in touch with you personally, how can they best find you?
Best place to find me is on Instagram. That's at Father of the Tribe AU with underscores between each word. And yeah, I do lots of sharing over there and Instagram lives, and I post clippets of podcast interviews and stuff there. And I've got some links in there. If anyone's interested, they can go through that and have a look at podcasts, and there's booking links, and my website's in there as well.
Awesome. Amazing. I love that. And we'll definitely have to put your details in the show notes below. Is there anything else, any other links that you want to kind of share with the team before we kind of knock off this session, bro?
No, I'm happy with that, man. Beautiful.
Awesome, Matt. Thank you so much for jumping on the show. Really, really appreciate it. This was the Dad Bub Show. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning in. If you want to get in touch with Matt, you know how to find him. Okay, he's just on the Instagram. It'll be in the links below, so go ahead and check him out. Reach out to him, comment, engage on his content, and if you ever need any support or help, just DM Matt, and he'll be able to help you out moving forward in your life, in your career, in your journey as a father, as a man, moving forward in your life. So, Matt, thank you very much for having us on the show. Oh, sorry, jumping on the show. I'm sometimes on a show, so thank you very much for jumping on the show, and we'll see you real soon. See you next time.
Beautiful, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye for now. That's it from us on this episode on the Dad Bub Show. If you want to find out a little bit more about us, head on over to www.dadbub.com. Until next time, see you next week.